In the dying winter of 235 AD, the snow-covered fields near the Rhine trembled, not from the hooves of enemy invaders, but from the rage boiling inside the Roman legions. They had grown tired of diplomacy, tired of weakness, and above all, tired of their emperor. Severus Alexander, barely a man, was about to face a fate that no emperor before him had. Suffered at the hands of his own troops, a murder so personal, it would send the Roman Empire spiraling into 5 decades of chaos and collapse. This is how it all began. Severus Alexander ascended to the throne at just 14 years old, the youngest sole emperor in Roman history, but he was never truly in charge. Behind the throne stood Julia Momia, his powerful and intelligent mother. She governed from the shadows, controlling politics, advising on military decisions, and sheltering her son from the brutal realities of empire. Together, they tried to bring stability after the blood-soaked reign of Elagabalus. They reduced corruption, promoted wise advisors, and tried to restore dignity to Rome. But Rome was no longer a city of peace. Beyond the Alps, the Germanic tribes stirred. Raids grew bolder, borders weakened, and fear crept into the hearts of Roman citizens. The legions demanded war, glory, vengeance, and strength, but Severus Alexander chose diplomacy. He offered gold to buy peace, and for the soldiers, that was the final insult. To the men who lived by the sword, who bled for the empire's name, paying off the enemy was not strategy, it was cowardice. They began to whisper in the camps. Loyalty wavered, anger swelled. Then a name began to rise among them. Maximinus Thrax, a towering brute of a man, a general of peasant birth, loved by the soldiers, feared by the Senate. The choice was clear. In the cold silence of March, the decision was made. The emperor would die, and with his blood, the age of peace would end. Severus Alexander had ruled for 13 fragile years. But now, in the harsh frontier cold of Germania, loyalty had frozen over. The legions had chosen their savior Maximinus Thrax, and the emperor had become a liability. The imperial tent was quiet that morning. Severus Alexander stood inside, praying for unity, perhaps even hopeful that his soldiers would come around. By his side, as always, was his mother, Julia Momia, strong, composed, yet visibly anxious. Then the sounds began. Boots, dozens of them, shouting, steel drawn. The emperor stepped outside, still dressed in imperial robes, not armor. He pleaded with his men. He begged for mercy. He reminded them of his generosity, his peaceful ways, the honors he had bestowed. He promised gold, favor, forgiveness. They did not listen. The first stone struck his shoulder, the second his face. Then the blades followed, dozens of them. The emperor collapsed to his knees, crying out for his mother, who was dragged from the tent and cut down beside him. No trial. No last words. Their bodies were left in the dirt, unburied, mutilated, stripped of royal dignity by the very men they had once led. The news of the assassination sent shockwaves through the empire. The Senate was horrified. They had lost control. The legions had crowned a barbarian-born general, an outsider, a brute. Maximinus Thrax had no noble blood, only scars and hatred for the elite. And now, he was emperor. The new regime began with purges. Senators loyal to Severus were executed. Governors were replaced. Fear seeped into every corridor of power. What followed was not just a change in leadership. It was the collapse of Roman stability. In the decades that followed, Rome became unrecognizable. Emperors rose and fell like shadows to 25 rulers in just 50 years. Most were murdered, barbarian. Invasions battered the frontiers. A deadly plague swept across cities. Economies crumbled. Civil wars became the new norm. And it all began with the murder of a boy emperor. In the snows of Germania, Severus Alexander died not just as a man, but as the final breath of Roman peace. From his blood rose an age of iron, fire, and ruin. History rarely warns us when an age is about to end. It doesn't shout, it whispers. And into 35 AD, that whisper was the quiet fall of a boy and his mother in the snow. The assassination of Severus Alexander was not merely the death of an emperor. It was the shattering of the Roman world as people knew it. For centuries, the Roman Empire had stood as the pillar of order, brutal, yes, but stable. Now, that foundation cracked. With one murder, the doors were flung open to half a century of bloodshed, betrayal, and barbarian chaos. What followed would make the death of Severus look tame. Generals would slaughter emperors for thrones that lasted weeks. Cities would burn in civil war. The empire would be torn into 3 rival states. Plagues would rot armies from the inside. And the frontiers, once tightly guarded, would bleed to invading tribes hungry for Rome's fall. Even Queen Zenobia would rise from the sands of the east to challenge Roman rule. And a soldier named Aurelian would forge an iron fist to pull the empire back from the abyss, if only for a time. These are the forgotten stories, buried in dust and time. If this is your first time Stepping into the shadows of history with us. Welcome to Lost Chapters, the stories too thrilling, too tragic, and too twisted to make it into your school books. We bring the past to life, one untold story at a time. If you found this journey gripping, subscribe to uncover the next dark chapter, the rise of Maximinus Thrax, Rome's barbarian emperor, a ruler who would plunge the empire into even deeper chaos. And remember, history doesn't repeat itself. It waits, sometimes in silence, sometimes in snow.